Hey guys, um, so I want to do a video talking a little bit about just some changes that I'd like to see, sort of some metagame changes, just some suggestions, things like that. And I wanted to do a video on it. Um, so I've got the experimental branch open, and I've got a little settlement here. I'm going to use this to talk about on the map, and then on my main account, I've got um, just the main, my main city and things like that. So I want to talk about a few things, kind of in the game that I'd like to see some changes, and as well as in the overmap. So the overmap is I call this the overmap over here. So we have some settlements here. I've done 4 of the daily challenges, so we have 4 completed settlements over here, and we have a new one that just started. Um, so yeah, it's been live for about 26 minutes. I think I'm gonna go ahead and do this one live as well. I know I haven't posted a video on doing the daily challenges, but I think we should be able to do this one. This is gonna have that one where you start with 8 impatience, which is I think very good. It's a nice challenge, puts a bit more of a clock on you. And then buildings require 50% more material. So this looks like it'll be somewhat challenging. So we'll see what we can do with that. But that's for another video. So okay, so a couple of things that I wanted to talk about. First of all, let's talk about the overmap. So I think there's some things that can be done with the overmap. We have these artifacts, machinery, food stockpiles, things like that. And then on top of that, we also have the upgrades. So the first thing I want to talk about is upgrades. So I know that I'm trying to stay pretty up to date on Discord. I try to read it every single day. And there's a lot of folks, and it seems like it's mainly just new folks who are talking about, I kind of wish that I didn't unlock certain buildings or which buildings should be not unlocked. Um, how should I progress with the tech tree? And then folks who have kind of completed the tech tree. So um, I've started from the start, from like the base 3 times. So I've kind of gone through this several times now. So I kind of know which ones are good, which ones are not good. Um, I might consider doing a video on that. But what I really think, and this is kind of my first point, is I think um, all of the buildings should be unlocked. There should not be this sort of like, you know, a lot of folks kind of, for instance, look at, dim square level 3, and we all know how bad mammal habitat is, right? Like, this is such a bad blueprint. We hate it. And we're just like, oh, we don't even want to unlock this, even though you can get Soul through, who's a pretty cool trader. But you don't want to even unlock this just because mammal habitat's such a bad upgrade. Let's pick something like first on headquarters, the pantry, right? The pantry is kind of it's an okay building, right? Build some things that are interesting, but the problem is that pack of trade goods can be usually built better in other places. Pickled goods is a good that a lot of folks I think maybe might avoid a little bit, so this is just kind of a whatever, so this is like an upgrade that people might avoid. Whereas something like, let's say, dim square level 2, having an essential building, especially housing, is just awesome. Having an essential building, like a common hall, is awesome. So there are certain upgrades, and I think that it would be probably more helpful for the game if everything was unlocked. And if the devs want to do something where you go through the tech tree, and you kind of unlock everything, that could be like the first part of the game before you kind of go into the second part of the game. But I do think that for the health of the game, having everything unlocked is going to be better. Second thing I want to talk about is I think that these little modifiers here, barren lands, weather anomaly, trade block, I think that these things should have a lot more impact. And one of the things that my suggestion for machinery and artifacts is, so I think that artifacts should be things that you can pick up, that you'll have them, and when you go into an embark, like let's say I want to embark here, there will be another little thing right here where I can buy cornerstone rerolls or order rerolls. and let's say it'll cost like one artifact per reroll, and I can only have however many I take with me when I embark. So, for instance, if I want to take three cornerstone or order rerolls, then I can pay three artifacts. Um, I mean, I know that right now you can collect like 15, but this could change to like, let's say, five. So every time that I complete a trade block, next to a trade block, I'll get five um, artifacts. And that also means that because these other you know um, factions are kind of quote unquote stealing resources, it makes it more interesting to actually go and take a particular resource, because what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to accumulate this. And then for machinery, I think what machinery should be is, instead of having these kind of arbitrary embark points that you get because you're in the smoldering city, and you get all of these embark points like this right here from the Pioneer's Gate. I think what it should be tied in with the machinery. So let's say I do this trade block, right, which you can't quite see, but you get 15. Okay, but let's say this ruined settlement, right, that gives me 10 machinery. So 10 machinery would now allow me to buy, you know, however many embark bonuses that I want, which means maybe on a particular map, I want to buy a whole bunch. Again, the numbers on this could be changed. So instead of giving 10 machinery from a ruined settlement, maybe it'll give me four, right? So, I'll collect four, and that will be the four embark bonuses that I can have. Now then, talking a little bit more about the overmap. So, I like to play games like Slay the Spire. I like to play games like Frostpunk. I like to play games like Civilization 6. Yeah, I like to play games like Stellaris. And so I take inspiration from those games. And one of the things that I think that would be very good for this game, and as much as I like the daily expeditions, don't get me wrong, these things are awesome. These things, you know, very, very interesting. Can't deny that, even though it's really weird that it just shoots me all the way out to the corner of the map sometimes. But what I really like about this game is two things. First of all, each each settlement, right, has a win condition, right? So, I can lose by having 12 of Queens of Patience. I could win by having reputation, So there's a win and a loss. And I think that's fun. That's what makes this game very, very unique compared to other games, is that you have this point where you're like, okay, great, I've won. Let's move on. So what I think could be a fun mechanic, and I think this is something that could help players to have a lot of fun repeatability, is that there's how do I put this? Basically, when you finish the cycle and you click this to end the current cycle, and you finish it all completely, everything resets. And it's not just that there's less people, less there all of the little modifiers get but just everything goes back to the basic. And all of your machinery, food, artifacts, all of this gets reset, and you start basically at zero. There could be some kind of mechanic that you can maybe store like five or something, you know what I mean? But essentially, all of this would be just a complete reset. And the purpose of each cycle has basically, there would be a lot more purpose to the cycle. And what I think is really going to be kind of crucial to that is really revamping all of these little modifiers. I think that one of the things that would be really good is that um, so one of the suggestions that I have is, let's take ruin settlement. So I think ruin settlement, which basically allows you to have more, um, there are more abandoned buildings on the map. So let's go to the map over here. So this is an abandoned building. I think one of the things that could be really fun is, if you find an abandoned building on a map, one of the options that you can have is rebuild, but another option, instead of salvage, or, a third option, so you can rebuild, you can salvage, but a third option you can have would be, for instance, to send the blueprint like back to this, back to the queen or something, something like that. But essentially, what that does is the next map you play. Okay, so let's say, for instance, my first map was Eli, which is up here, right? So on this map, let's say I started off and I had this alchemist hut. And let's say what I did is I sent that blueprint back. Well, on the next map that I play, which is on Matlock, which is over here, that alchemist hut is now a quote unquote essential building. So that blueprint is now in my in my pool of buildings. So when I look at here, it is now available for me as an essential building. I think something like that would be really cool. And that way, when I reset the cycle, all of my quote unquote free blueprints that I got go away and everything's reset. And I think things like that could really help to sort of alleviate, I think, some of the problems that I think folks have in talking about, oh, certain buildings are useless, certain buildings, are not needed, and things like that. Another thing that I want to talk about is, in regards to that, is if something like that is implemented, I think having like three choices, could be, better instead of the four that you get when you max it out. Um, and so what that means is that, you will try to open up glades, and not every glade will have, you know, abandoned buildings or things like that. I think that needs to be, tweaked a little bit as well. But having this option that, like, hey, I can find a building and I can then make it an essential building, so that then as I progress further into the cycle, as I progress further, and now I'm on, Apollos, which is over here. Now I have, let's say, like five essential buildings as blueprints already. You know what I mean? Like an alchemist hut. Maybe I will have a druid's hut. Maybe I'll have a lumber mill. So I'll kind of have these buildings that are already preset. And what that'll allow me to do is the next buildings, the next, where as I progress further out into the map, um, obviously it looks a little weird because the daily expeditions, like I said, just send you out into the middle of nowhere. But if you just play like regular, as you progress further out into the map and you go into more harder and harder territory, um, then having those kind of buildings, I think, would be very, very useful. And what that would allow is, for instance, like maybe the first couple of little markers out here would be things like ruined settlement, or stonewood infestation, or something else. But as you go further out, you'll run into barren lands, you'll run into trade block, you'll run into faulty instruments, you'll fall, into harder and harder um, modifiers essentially. And I think that these modifiers, what they really provide, I think, should be increased in their difficulty. But essentially, as you go through the cycle, you will, you're because I know people bring up this term like, building out a deck, but it's kind of like that. You're kind of like building out a deck because you're finding buildings and you're adding them into your essential building slot, so that by the time you get to like the, like the fringe sections, like let's say, you go to this cursed, woodlands over here, and let's say that cursed woodlands has a trade block and a faulty instrument, next to it, you can actually kind of accomplish it, you can complete it. And then in regards to that, I think that that's where things like deeds can have some sort of benefit. Right now, deeds, I mean, this is fun. I don't know which of the devs came up with this. You know what I mean? I think, this is fun, but for the most part, it's kind of useless, right? Once you've gotten to the end, what do you do? Where's the replayability? How do you continue to, you know, find joy in, and how do you continue to find challenge in the game? And I think the deed structure can kind of go away a little bit, but essentially I think having these modifiers be even more dangerous the further out you go, I think, is going to be better. That goes into my next thing that I want to talk about, and that is the difference between normal. So here's a normal map, hard, very hard, and then impossible. So I think this, uh, as nice as this is, and that, as you go out further into the, further out there, I think to be completely honest, it needs a bit of a rework. And I think one of the ways it could be reworked is to actually make it so that when you click, like for instance, I'm clicking on this and I want to build a town here, that here on the on the modifier or something, I can click just like I do with the daily expeditions and change the difficulty. And I think that will help a lot of newer players because then they can say, okay, let's say you're going to fire up a game of Civilization or Stellaris, right? You can choose the difficulty that you want to have the map to be on. Um, I think another thing that you could do is make the entire cycle just be a specific difficulty, right? So you start up a cycle, and that cycle would be on hard or very hard or impossible, and that will allow players to, kind of just really, really get the full experience of like, hey, how do I go into the map, right? How do I, which buildings do I make as my essential buildings? Maybe this Alchemist hut is going to be required for me to actually win this map. So I cannot afford to make it into an essential building because I have to rebuild it in order to win this map. And those kind of dynamic choices, I think, are a lot more fun. Um, I might come back a little bit more talking about the overmap, but let's go into another thing that I want to talk about, and that is that how to make this part more challenging. So one of the things that I think me and pretty much most players really like is are these little modifiers, right? These little modifiers are kind of the thing that makes us restart every map, right? We are always curious to know, okay, what modifiers are there? Will we be able to beat it? And things like that. And to me, I think there needs to be a lot more of these. There need to be a lot more of them. I think that they need to be even more dynamic. I think, for instance, there needs to be even ones for each of the different types of settlements. So, for instance, I think that on Scarlet Orchard, which is kind of a more farming land, um, a place where there might be more air, fertile soil, things like that. Having things that benefit farmers. Like for instance, during the instead of because right now there's really only like bonuses during the drizzle and then negatives during the storm. Why aren't there negatives during the drizzle? Why aren't there negatives during the clearance? Why aren't there bonuses during the storm? Why aren't there bonuses during the clearance? I think those kind of things should exist. I think that um, these things right here, there needs to be at least double, if not triple, the amount that there are currently at the moment. Um, so yeah, like I said, let's say that on a Scarlet Orchard, during the clearance, you have like farmers, if they have a house, will gain additional 10% for bonus yield, right? So humans who are farmers can gain, instead of plus 10%, can now have plus 20% or plus 30% chance for bonus yields if they have housing or if they have um, specific foods. So for instance, there's the biscuit diet, right, where it allows for plus 50% chance. I think something like that could be really fun in the Scarlet Orchard. For something like the Marshlands, which is kind of a lizard haven, having things like during the drizzle, during like the storm, for instance, you know what I mean, where they're already suffering in some ways, but you could have things like lizard specific bonuses, where it's like lizards receive plus 2 happiness during the storm if they have um, if they're working in a building of their of so like for instance, double the resolve bonus of lizards in their in buildings, for instance, something like that. So that way, when you're in the storm, there's an additional benefit. It's not just like a really bad time, but there's also good time, things like that. In the coral forest, um, I think that with how many races there are, I think it would be really fun if each place had its own thing. So like I said, I brought up Scarlet Orchard for the humans, but like you could have the Royal Woodlands be for the beavers, so they could have something with like rain punk and trees, and they could, and their bonus could be like during the storm, beavers, you know, woodcutters receive plus 20% bonus. So even though most players would take off woodcutters during the storm, maybe there would be a benefit, you know what I mean? So for beavers, beavers would receive a benefit for that, something like that. But yeah, so I think having a lot more of these is is kind of going to be crucial, I think, for the long-term health of the game because um, playing around these, I think, is a lot of fun. Okay, this is a big one, and I hope you guys have stuck around because I know a lot of folks maybe don't stick around, but I really kind of want to talk about it. So we have this, we have this overmap, right? But we spend all of our time on here, and I really feel like this and Queen's Impatience and the reputation system and the order system needs a bit of rework. And this is kind of what I want to explain. So there was a bit of a chat recently on Discord about how there's like three ways to win, but it's really only one way to win. And I just want to clarify this. Like, there's only one way to win, and this is how I'm going to explain it. So orders. Each time you complete an order, right, you gain one reputation. Here's the thing, guys. Everything is in order. Everything. So this order you can see, it's called problem solver, and it's called, you have to solve two events, and you will gain one queen's grades, one point of reputation. And then people are like, oh, what, resolve or opening caches is like another way. No, no, it's not. This is another order. This order is called send to the citadel. This order requires you to have 10 tools, and you complete this order by sending it by doing this right here. This isn't anything else. This isn't some unique mechanic. This is an order, and it does the exact same thing that I would have over here. If I pick this order and this order right here, which says pack of trade goods, if this order instead said 10 tools, you know, um, send 10 tools and you will gain one, you will gain one Queen's Grace. That's exactly what this is. So the other one, of course, is resolve, and I'm really sad that I didn't pick it when I was doing this. But I had an order that said keep humans happy for keep human resolve at 55, and that's an order, and it's human happiness or whatever the name of it is. Well, there's another order. You don't see it; it's not on the map, but it's called keep humans happy at 70 resolve for like for 4 minutes. Keep humans resolve happy for 4 minutes, and you gain one reputation point. That's an order. It's not called an order, but that's basically what it is. It's the exact same thing as that. And I think what the devs need to do is they really need to hone in on making the order system be the win mechanic for the game. I've said it before and I'm going to say it again. I think that this is one of the most fun aspects of the game. I think this is kind of what guides a lot of players because they will pick orders, they will pick things, and they will say, okay, so I have this next order. This order is pack of trade goods or makeshift hearth and storage, right? So what this means is this can kind of dictate where my game is going to go. Do I build an expansion or do I go heavier into trade? This is kind of where this is a choice I have to make, and this is where me as a player I gain agency. And I think having more orders, having more dynamic orders, I think orders should even maybe have three choices instead of two, and essentially get rid of this reputation bar because this reputation bar I think is really really deceiving. I think it gives people this sense that like, oh, you know what I mean, I'm just trying. No, you're not doing these other things. All you're doing is completing orders, and whether that order is sending 10 tools in order to gain a point of reputation, or you know sending 18 pack of crops, or solving a glade event, or building a makeshift hearth, or it's let's say it's one of these, you know what I mean, or solving a glade event. They're all orders. That's all that they are. And to have this kind of reputation bar where people are like, oh, do I do this, do I do that? And I think by building the system around orders, it would be a lot healthier for the game, because essentially it would give players the understanding of, okay, this is what I'm doing. this is the purpose of what I want to do. So when they pick, from here, they're like, okay, I'm going into the Royal Woodlands out, or I mean, I'm going to the Scarlet Orchard over here by, the trade block modifier. Um, there's going to be certain orders that are going to be, distinct in that there's not going to be any, or there's not going to be trade, there's not going to be that. So I have to determine how I'm going to win in a different way. And when they do that, you know, they'll be given options that kind of pull them in a specific way. But it's their choice. They still have choice, and they can still say, okay, I want to have makeshift hearth. I want to build a farming economy, and kind of win through that. You'll be given more orders of things like keep your humans happy, keep your lizards happy. Um, you know, um, create pack of crops, things like that. Even though you're on a trade block modifier, you will have this because that's kind of the direction that you as a player are going in order to win the game. And while you're doing that, you're also trying to dodge all of these negative modifiers and try to play around with the positive modifiers. And uh, I think that needs to be changed. So anyways, that's a big long rant on orders and why I think that orders should be there. Now, what do I think should be done with the happiness and things like that? I think happiness is a really fun mechanic, and I think what they can do, what you can do is essentially you can still have this whole Queen's impatience meter, right? And the purpose of this whole Queen's impatience meter is that this is how you lose, right? I think that's totally fine. I think completing orders is what you should do to essentially, um, make sure that you don't lose to the Queen's impatience. So let's say that there's, 10 orders, right? Or here I have 11 orders, but let's just make it 10. Every single map, no matter which one you play, impossible, difficulty, normal difficulty, doesn't matter. You have 10 orders that you have to complete, and that's the purpose of every single map. And how you do it is that's up to you. Do you open dangerous glades? How do you respond to the various events and things like that? I think that's what you do. And then I think what happiness should do is it should have different effects on playing around with these modifiers. So, for instance, keeping people happy should be like a bigger part of this. So, um, for instance, at level 3 there should be, a modifier that says, during the clearance, keep your lizards happy. Keep lizard resolve above 50. Otherwise they will destroy things. Things like that. You could also play around with it where this could be based on a percentage system as for how quickly the Queen's impatience goes up. So for instance, let's say the Queen's impatience goes up at, you know 1.0. Okay, well, that's maybe too much. Let's say, like, 0.40 per minute. Okay, so 0.40, so it's going up pretty darn quickly in the beginning. But the more higher resolve you have, the less it'll go up. So for instance, if everybody is above 80 resolve, then it'll go up at like 0.04 per minute or something like that. um, Essentially, that's kind of how it plays. I think keeping people happy should play more into the production of the, like, how things are produced, things like that. um, and yeah, I think also, um, like the threshold, like if that is done, then the threshold for when people leave can even go up a little bit, which means, keeping people happy becomes a bigger aspect of it. And of course, keeping people happy is not gonna play into every single order either. So you can have every single order be, uh, or I mean, every single order is going to be different, right? You might have a couple orders where you need to keep people happy, but a lot of other orders are just going to be production based. Produce buildings or build buildings, or send goods to the queen, things like that. So there's that. Another thing that I want to talk about is these dangerous glades. I love them. Like, I love these dangerous glades. What I hate though is how easy it is to solve. So they've made it where, they've kind of introduced this whole increasing hostility, things like that. But I think that this absolutely needs to be implemented. I think this is going to be very good for the game. Is you need to scale how difficult it is to rebuild or to do any of these things based on what difficulty you're on. So, for instance, if I'm right now, which is this is the experimental branch, yeah, this is my regular one, yeah. So on the experimental branch, I've started this. This is on hard, I think, 1.5 times difficulty. So at hard, so on normal, this should be 10. At hard, this should be 15. Very hard, 25. And at like impossible, this should be like 50 planks, and everything should be, kind of scaled that way. So for instance, it'd be like 40 oil or, 40 coal or like 25 simple tools. If you're playing on the impossible difficulty, because impossible should be hard and it's not. And when, it doesn't matter if I play on impossible or if I play on very hard, if I only need four tools, that doesn't make it hard for me who likes to play every game on impossible. Like that's just too easy. So I think all of this needs to be scaled. I think all of these little quests here to rebuild and things like that need to be scaled to the impossible. Like for instance, like I said, at normal it should be a one. At at very hard it should be different. And I look at games like Stellaris, which I really like to play. When you play on like Admiral, Grand Admiral, the AI gets all these bonuses. There's all these kind of quote unquote cheats, to make it harder. But that's because as a player, I've gone to a point where I know how to play the game. I know how to build my planets. I know how to build my galaxies, or I mean, I know how to take the waypoints in the galaxies, and I know how to how to properly build out my planets and things like that. So I up my difficulty. When I first started, I didn't do that. I played on normal. I played on hard. I didn't play on like Grand Admiral difficulty. I think for people that are playing like Civilization, when you first play the game, sure you start like normal, and then you'll go up to the harder difficulties, and then when you get to the final difficulty, I think there's a lot of players that only play on deity, for instance, because they're just like, we know the game mechanics enough that for us the challenge is deity always, and that's because everything there has scaled to such a degree that they have that challenge. But for other players, they can say, no, that's just too hard. I don't know how to do certain things, so I play on normal, hard, very hard. And I think having like a scaling difficulty is going to be very good for making the game harder. Because I still haven't lost a map. You know what I mean? Like even like these challenges. So I know that there's the daily expedition here, so I'm gonna upload this. Like this seems pretty hard. You have to you start with 8 impatience. You have buildings cost more and things like that. So we'll see. But I'm gonna play it on impossible. I'll upload it. But I still haven't lost a map, and part of that is because you know things like opening caches is just so easy because there's no difference. Opening this medium abandoned cache it costs me 10 simple tools, whether I'm playing it on normal, hard, very hard, or impossible. There's no I don't have to put thought into that. I don't have to make find out what is easier, what's harder, things like that. um, okay, so there's that. All right, another thing that I want to talk about is and if, I hope you've stuck around. um, Caches get rid of the Queen's reputation. I think they did this in the opposite way, where um, the Glade events, or like the ones where you can send humans, things like that. I think all of those should be the ones that give you reputation if they're going to continue with the system of giving reputation. Again, I don't like it. I think that everything should be within this order system, because and I watch other YouTubers, I watch other people play this game, and they don't complete all of their orders. They usually will complete some of them. They'll complete maybe like 5, 6, 7 orders, but they'll also just basically send tools, and then they'll get at least 1 or 2 points from reputation. And to me, it's kind of like it appears as if they're doing different things when they're not. What they're doing is they're just completing a couple of orders that you see on the in your screen, like you see right here. Oh, okay, this is camps, so I need to build one of these and build one of these. But what there is there's this hidden, you know there's this hidden order that's called open a cache. Open one large cache, gain one reputation, and they're like, oh, okay, here's a cache. Oh, open it. And that's what it is. And so I think that to make it easier for the players, it's like you give them 10 orders, and this is how you win the game, and you try to solve those 10 orders, and that's how you complete it. And as you move on in the game, I think that'll be helpful for it. But yeah, and I think there needs to be a lot more of these. I think at the moment there's like 15. I want to say. I think if I remember correctly, about like 10 or 15 of these dangerous glade events. I think there needs to be like 40 or 50. Um, I should be able to. I should see a whole variety of them. Um, and they should do all kinds of fun things. I love the ones that, for instance, the one that gives like 5 insects per minute. Awesome. you know, there should be one that gives like, 5 wood per minute, or, 5 coal per minute, or I don't know, but there should be ones that give resources. There should be, there's ones like this one that gives decreases hostility, but there really should be a whole lot of fun ones. I mean, heck, there could even be one that like, gives, like 2 ale per minute or 3 ale per, you know what I mean? There's so many fun little things, and I think they should be in the game. I think it'll bring a lot of spice to the game, make it more interesting, make it more fun, things like that. But yeah, I think having a lot more dangerous events. I think having a lot more of these kind of modifiers, things like that. This is what the game needs, in order to not be too stale. I think, because this is what we look forward to: opening up glades, finding out, is this going to be the mole? Is this going to be the rain spirit token? Is this going to be a, you know, oh, what is that thing? Is it going to be like an open vault that is going to, like all of that? That to me is where the fun is. I spend 90% of my time on this part of the game, and about 10% on this part of the game, So, you know, if I spend 90% of the, I want this part to be fun. I want this part to have meaning. I want this part to have to where I make the choices, when I pick something like a carpenter, I want to know that this has value and meaning and purpose and things like that. And I'm going to utilize this as best I can. And that's where it's going to be a lot of fun. Um, let's see here. I took some notes, but I think I've covered most everything. One thing that I think also, this is maybe a bit of a fringe idea, but I think will be really interesting is, again, like I said, let's say that there are 10 orders. There's not like a difference of like, 12 for normal and then like 9 for possible, nothing like that. But just every single map has 10. And I think that the cornerstone choice should be tied to it as well. So, for instance, when I complete this camps order, um, not only will the queen's impatience go down by a point, but that's when I get my cornerstone. That's when I can pick my cornerstone, not just at the first start of the year, but during that part. Um, I think that would be kind of interesting to have that. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's also interesting that all of the choices are staggered a little bit. Um, there's good and bad to that as well. And yeah, so kind of to finish up my thought, I think that, um, kind of recap. I think that I was looking at Frostpunk the other day, and I love Frostpunk. Frostpunk is such a fun game. But one of the things about Frostpunk is that all of the buildings that you can unlock and everything you unlock within one map. And an average map for me on Frostpunk is like 4 to 6 hours, something like that. Um, and in that one map, I get to unlock everything. And I think for a game like this, where you have blueprint choice and things like that, where I think players need to have everything unlocked. Um, None of this like, oh, I'm gonna pick, you know, um, the ranch. By the way, I skip this all the time. But like, like the workshop, they're like, oh, okay, I'm gonna take this upgrade for the workshop. I'm gonna take this one for the cellar. I'm gonna skip, this one. I'm gonna take this one, kind of things like that. And I see in the chat, in the Discord, that people are like, oh, I'm skipping and things like that. And it's like, I'm like, no, don't skip them. Like, the fun part is figuring out, how do you work with a kiln? If you have a kiln, how do you work with it? How do you make it work? If you have a fine smith, how do you make it work? You know, Even just having base, like a 1-star training gear, that's awesome. There's, that training gear gives 8 resolve. Like, yeah, you know what I mean? But a lot of folks are like, oh, I don't pick certain buildings. And it's like, and I think that if it was unlocked, I think it would kind of stop that debate. But in regards to that, I think that having the ability to, for instance, accumulate within a given run, like let's say you accumulate artifacts, right? And when you start, and when you click on your smoldering city, right? Maybe you can have like a little, like buy upgrades, deeds, but then you can have like another one or something like that, or just changed. And what it does is, you can, for that, and remember how I talked about how, you have one cycle, you have one cycle where everything's completed. Um, in that one cycle, you can block out a certain blueprint. So for instance, if you collected, some machinery, um, you can then go into the smoldering city and you can take out a building. So for instance, you will never see the smelter anymore. It will no longer be a blueprint choice for you, something like that. Um, it will be there when you restart the cycle. When you click the end of the cycle and you restart it, it'll be available again. But I think of something like Slay the Spire, right? Slay the Spire, getting rid of things like your strikes and defends and your basic cards, is part of what makes the game better. And I think, if you increase the challenge by making settlements harder and harder the further you go out, you provide bigger and bigger, penalties and things like that. Um, making making it so that making so that you don't receive certain blueprints could help you. Now, I'm not a believer in that, but I think that that could be one way of doing it. But yeah, okay. I think I've talked enough for this one. I will be uploading. I think I'm actually going to go live. I'm going to try to do this whole live thing, for the daily expedition. So look forward to that. It'll probably be in like an hour or something like that. All right, guys. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and yeah, let me know what you think. And again, I read a lot of, pretty much most of what's on Discord, so I just kind of wanted to voice my thoughts as well. Um, like I said, I have more thoughts and things like that. I have written out, I think, about like 20 different modifiers for these things that I think would be really, really fun. Some of them are kind of like race based, like, specifically for humans or specifically for lizards. Um, and some of them are more like, farming based or gathering based or things like that. But yeah, I think there needs to be a lot more of these. I think there needs to be a lot more variety in orders. And again, I think that having maybe even like a third choice for the orders would actually be pretty good. All right, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed, and yeah, I'd love to hear your comments.